is up? The squad is favorite non-team local tendencies, and I am back, y'all, with CS Racing Report. It is our WNBA Fix It Series episode number 2, and we still trying to get the WNBA right, y'all. We started our conversation in our first episode. We started talking about some of the mistakes that we feel like the WNBA has made, and some of the things that they can do as they look to be able to grow the league from 12 teams to 16 teams. We know already that they have some ideas about some of the cities that they're considering, but we're going to be offering some insight and some options that they should maybe consider that would give them an opportunity to be a lot more profitable, a lot faster. So, CS, welcome back. I appreciate you hanging out with me, fam. I'm honored to do this with you. I'm looking forward to being able to get this content out. So let's get started. What you got this week?
Well, as we all know, as we break it down with the best, knowing it's not on CBS with Cess, we are going to break down this WNBA thing. Someone likened it to a flea market format in terms of building the league. And as I said in episode 1, for anyone that watched that, and you can go to Cess's channel to go and rewatch that if you watched it the first time, if you want to watch it for the first time. But I'll quickly kind of scale over that by saying the one thing we mentioned was that it feels like the expansion that they're getting ready to do is going to be the same thing they did the first time, which was to go to the big cities, the big NBA markets, thinking that they can funnel in the fans of those NBA franchises and decide in doing that they're going to be able to get that 1 to 5% population in these multi-thousand populated cities or multi-million populated cities. And if you get that 1 to 5%, you're going to have sellouts at MSG or the Staples Center or any arena you can name. And as we all know, that's a broken model that has backfired and has created a 25+ year debt. So what the alternatives is to maybe go a route that, as I said in episode 1, we may have touched on, which is, or they may have posed to the investors, to go to these college towns, which we know there's a question: do we want to stay as a college town, or do we want to be a dual entertainment city of college and pro? And whether that was put on the tables, on the desk of the WNBA management, they've made a decision that either A, they killed it right then and there and found out all the reasons to not do it, or it's, the presentation that we're trying to lay out really hasn't been, it hasn't really been posed, or it has not been bought up to people. So, and maybe perhaps in doing that, people will say, that's a good idea. Why didn't we think of that, from the get-go? So there's a lot of fertile ground out there where they say the grass is greener on the other side. There's a lot of areas. I looked at the distance of cities in terms of which cities can be viable on its own with its own general population in the counties around it, and what's the big city or medium-sized city that would funnel in if the locals are having an off day and everybody doesn't want to go to the game. There's kind of like a clash of cities where if there's interest across the board, you're going to probably have maybe not enough tickets, which is, a good problem to have. You'd rather have less tickets. So there's a lot of cities that have that are maybe thirsting for basketball, any kind of basketball, and in this case, the WNBA.
Question for you. In your consideration, were there certain criteria that a city or area had to meet to be able to make your list?
Well, yeah, actually in the first, yes, that's a good question, because that's a follow-up to the first episode. Is we're looking at population of the city, what's the arena size, and the arena size, in theory, 5,000, doesn't sound like a big number, doesn't sound like a profit term, but what we're looking at is in that 5,000, your chances of getting debt, having, empty, 3/4 empty arenas is probably on the low side. So if it's 5,000 and above, anywhere between 5 and 15, you start getting into 15, 20, 18, 19,000. Like in Ohio State's got almost 19,000. I think obviously the Dean Dome in Chapel Hill at the University of North Carolina, that's 20,000. That's where you're taking a little bit of a chance. And to be honest, if you're in the 15, above the 12 range, 15, 16,000, it's doable if you're in a market that after exams, summer season, you've got that fan base that's looking for more basketball. So that was the criteria, keeping it between 5 and 15,000. Oh, and keep in mind, Cess, we all know Atlanta only does 3,500 where the Dream play at. And that's another whole, well, it's a sidebar conversation as to what arena they could play in. Obviously, there's Georgia Tech. Back in the day, there used to be the Omni back in Dominique's day. I forget the arena that the Hawks are playing at. And they may have calculated maybe that's going to be hard to sell out. But we don't want arenas that are in the 3,000 to 5,000 range, because then, you can't really make enough money to put enough gas in the buses to get these players from city to city, or enough gas in the car for the players to get from A to B, even though now chartered flights are in. So that was kind of the criteria that we used, or that I looked at when considering the cities. And a lot of the college towns fit that criteria. Some of them are a little bit on the large side, but that was one way we looked at it.
Got it. I think that's a great approach, because I think that gives an opportunity to be able to take advantage of, like you said, the locals, plus maybe the people that may funnel through these college towns or just these college areas, to be able to introduce the sport to new fans, but also have it available to fans that already are following either these teams or even just these players in their area. So how do you see the approach from here? How would you lay this thing out?
Glad you asked. Well, the cities right now that I'm looking at, and again, you almost have to oversubscribe, because you have to anticipate some of these cities don't want WNBA basketball, don't want these players hanging around their town in the summer months. So the good thing about it is there's a lot of options. And if you can cash in on most of your top options, then you can get things underway. But on the flip side, you've got a sort of, as they always say, a plan B, a plan C. There's a lot of viable options out there. It's just a matter of whether these commissioners and managers between the WNBA and these schools and these cities that, as you said, are looking for more basketball. Some cities don't even realize, that's not a bad idea to have that team. So,
but on the flip side, and I want to say too, because I want to call this out, because on the last episode, you made a good point that some of these college towns are going to want to stay college towns, right? And so, where they might be viable everywhere else, just the fact that they don't want pro ball in their city would be the reason that they will walk away from it. Not that it's not profitable or that it couldn't work in a college town that already has lots of basketball. And I want to call that out. Like, it's not that it can't work in those areas. Just some of those cities may just only want college hoops in their area. So I thought that was a really good point that came out on the last episode. And I wanted to make sure that we reminded the viewers of that. Didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, and then you have a lot of these cities. And one of the main things we talked about in the first episode was the fact that you have some markets where the colleges aren't as strong. Maybe, you have some colleges that don't have a full-fledged a full program menu. Some colleges don't have football and the other sports. You get your full-on universities like Ohio State, Michigan, whatever else. You've got a strong college market, and those are some of the cities that fit. But you have some cities like LA that have survived on some level. The Sparks have survived, but cities like LA that have multiple pro teams. In the case of LA, they've got 2 NBA teams for many years. They had 2 NFL teams, and you might as well say between the Rams and the Raiders being there, and now, of course, we've got the Chargers and I think the Rams in LA at this point. That's a lot to deal with, plus UCLA and USC and the surrounding schools. So a place like Philadelphia, which loves its basketball, you've got LaSalle, you've got all the colleges, not to mention all the pro teams there, the Flyers, the Phillies, the Eagles. That's a lot to compete with, even though some of that stuff isn't going on during the summer. And then, of course, you have the colleges during the fall. And as you said, some of them just want their college ball. Can we take on another team? Well, the flip side is maybe we would like to take on a WNBA team. And for those people in South Carolina that would be afraid that might be the reason Dawn Staley would leave Columbia, even though she's got a lifetime deal in the works. Whoever the coach is, it is possible that Philly could work out. But I stayed away from cities that are, top heavy with pro markets, even if the college programs weren't incredibly good. But with that being said, a couple of cities we talked about are sort of on their strong alternatives. Cleveland is one. They had the Rockers there in sort of post Lynette Woodard time. The reason why I say Cleveland could work, even though it is a town loaded with sports teams, whether you think they're all bad or all good, is the fact that you're looking at ETAs. You're looking at ETAs. What's the distance between Cleveland and Columbus, which is the University of, which is Ohio State, the Ohio State. The ETAs are really good. So it's possible some of that Columbus crowd would come to Cleveland. On the flip side, if you do a team in Columbus, then a lot of people in Cleveland would funnel in to Columbus because the ETA, and I'll get to the ETAs, but I do want to, before we get into that, look at the cities that I've got on the tier 1 list. And then to my right side, we've got sort of the alternative in case plan A falls apart.
So, and just to be clear here, when we're talking here, this is about expansion, not necessarily moving any of the teams that exist right now. Or are some of those teams that some of those cities you think the WNBA should maybe consider leaving as well?
Well, we didn't really dive to the bottom of the pool in terms of the bottom of the lake on what teams could be relocated. It was more of a case of looking at how do you expand the league? How do you make a league that is going to be more than the 16 they're looking at, make it 20 teams deep, have a second league, and that's another episode in and of itself based on what the NBA may or may not do. But there is a chance in here. There's a couple cities that it is possible based on the list that I've come up with that either they can't coexist or it may be more practical to move it away from the city they're currently in. So it's not really a wipeout or a makeover of the 12 teams, although I think a couple of them do have some issues. I don't think you move Minnesota. I think LA and New York, I think any sports league likes to have LA and New York in the marketplace. They just want LA and New York. They put a lot of stock in it, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, even though there have been plenty of times where teams in New York and in California, have not been so good. So
look at the Knicks.
The Liberty and the Sparks, I think, are going to be fine. But some of the other cities, I would say, as I said, Minnesota, I think, is set. I think Dallas will be okay in a flooded market. But, the beauty of this format is there's other teams in Texas, and we could, there could be, a rivalry, a shootout at the Alamo without even having to touch Houston or San Antonio. And some people might say, well, how do you do that? Well, there is a way, but you have to have the numbers to back it up, and the numbers are there, and the location is there. Texas is basically Texas is the size of Great Britain. So it's a huge piece of land like California is. And then there's other pockets that we can look at too. And for those of you interested in hearing the list, I've definitely got one.
Let's go.
All right.
I'm here for the list. Yes, I'm here for the list. Let's go.
Yeah. So we've given it enough hype. We've definitely given it Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark hype. I have Corvallis, Oregon. That's Oregon State University. And I have Boise, Idaho, Boise State. Now, again, those could crash out and they wouldn't be interested in doing that. But those are two places. The alternative would be Eugene, Oregon, which is the University of Oregon. And then, of course, you have Pocatello in Idaho. So those aren't – Eugene's probably the strongest of the two alternatives. Corvallis really looks good to me because of the arena size and the population. And those numbers are pretty good. I would say I think we're looking at about a 9,000 to 11,000 seat arena in that region. And so those are some of the cities that I think, I can go a little bit more into numbers out there. I'm going kind of from the left to the east. Colorado Springs, that's where the Air Force is. Their numbers are good. Fort Collins, Colorado State, you're looking at about 7,000 seat arenas, but it's Colorado. And I like the setup there, and I actually can hit the Colorado numbers. Let's see here. I think Colorado State, I think I'm going to say it hosts about 7.5. They're in that range, or 9. So that's really a good option. And then when I go back beyond that, the other cities would be Lafayette, Louisiana, Lafayette, Ruston, and Monroe. Ruston, of course, is the home of Louisiana Tech. They were the first dynasty in women's college basketball before Tennessee came along, and UConn and the powerhouses kind of overtook them. Actually, it was USC that actually booted La Tech out in the Cheryl Miller era. And so they have the right sizes. Baton Rouge would be the 4th city. Most people think Baton Rouge would be the first choice at LSU. LSU is a professionally run college organization, but to your point, Cess, I do think Baton Rouge could end up being the option because of the fact LSU does have a great infrastructure. But Lafayette has enough population in the surrounding regions. We're looking at 700,000 people, and there's a chance that 700,000 people don't want to watch basketball in the spring. But something tells me with 700,000, I think you got a pretty good chance to make it happen. Ruston might be a little bit on the risky side. Monroe is also good. The numbers are really good in terms of population. Lafayette directly is 121.3, 244 in the surrounding counties. Their arena's 13,500. Monroe, the population's a little low, 47,000, but the proximity of the cities are pretty good. And that's 7,000. And then Ruston, the city population is a little bit on the low side, 22.1, 8.1 as far as the arena side. Some of these small cities have big arenas, so obviously they're getting people to come in from another town. Baton Rouge speaks for itself. I think we're looking at anywhere between 12 and 17,000 as far as, so everybody's seen Baton Rouge on TV. And again, you could make that work, but there's no question there could be at least one WNBA team out of that state. And you can comment on how you think one of those, if you still think Baton Rouge is the best choice out of those cities. I'm working on this list here.
So for me, it's Baton Rouge because I think they may have the most amenities and the most other stuff around in the city to go with, like a nightlife or something to be able to attract people in. Well, I'm thinking about hotels. You probably aren't, you got the team coming in. You want to be able to get them into an airport. You don't want them to have to take a real long trip to be able to get to the game, to get to the arena where they're going to stay. So I just think Baton Rouge might have a little bit more city feel to it. But I could definitely understand the Monroe, because I understand that people go to Monroe to party. So I don't know. Probably Monroe and Baton Rouge would be the two that I would pick. But I could see it Lafayette. I'm not Ruston. You kind of surprised me with the Ruston. You pulled the Ruston out the hat right there. I didn't see that one coming. But Lafayette, Monroe, Baton Rouge, I could definitely see those. I like the idea of the Corvallis, and I also like the Colorado Springs. I like those two as well. Yeah.
The proximity is really good. Yeah, the proximity is really good. And I think that there's enough enthusiasm outside of Baton Rouge. You could make one of those cities work. And the one thing about it is Lafayette, it's got a little bit more pop in terms of, what I mean by pop is population, and you do need bodies, you need people. Although, LSU is a concentrated area. Once things start up, football season, basketball season, you get people that will come in. It's a big time college where that is the centerpiece of the city. And if you can get that in the summertime, then you have the same thing going on that you do with, with the Tigers with their program. So Baton Rouge definitely viable. It's my fourth option, and some people find that surprising, but that's the beauty of it. If that's the fourth option, what are the other three? Because you're trying to do something a little bit new, and there are some people out there like, well, it's about time that somebody took a look at us, in terms of having a viable team, because we'll support that team. And like I said, some of these cities, the proximity is there. Mississippi, there are a lot of people thinking, people think casinos, gambling in Biloxi or in Tunica and places like that. And Mississippi sports, when SEC football is going on, people think of Mississippi. But beyond that, there's not a lot of thinking. And I've got Jackson, where Jackson State is, and Hattiesburg. They both have arenas. That Hattiesburg, the population is, I believe, 153.7. Jackson is like in the 50 range. And the stadiums, each arena is about 8,000. So the risk versus reward is probably a little bit on the lower end than trying to go somewhere where you're trying to sell out 20,000 and you've got people putting flyers on cars to try to come to a WNBA game. I mean, there have been people that have been offended by people doing that, putting flyers on their cars because people were so desperate on these teams or fans trying to get fans in. So these places, same thing could happen, but the number based on the criteria I have really makes that a sneaky fit, because people love their sports down there, and I would put it on the table and see what they say. So Hattiesburg and Jackson, Mississippi. Then I've got, it really gets interesting because we talked about these places. So what better way than to talk about it than to have some numbers? After that, you've got Birmingham and Mobile. Alabama has 5 viable options. Most people think Alabama, Auburn. And Auburn is a town with 96,000. The arena is 76,000. The arena is 9.1. Tuscaloosa, University of Alabama. We said you're having to compete with that atmosphere of Auburn, Alabama. And a lot of people are exhausted, but will they support summertime basketball? I have them as like the 4th or 5th option, but I would have no problem with someone saying those cities would work. But of course, that would, if management comes up and says they would have no problem with it, then that's the key to the whole thing working. Most fans think those are the places, but what would the schools say? And that's why Birmingham, Mobile, and Montgomery all could work. UAB is Alabama, Birmingham, and they've always had a good basketball program on the men's side. And Birmingham, just to give you a little bit of Birmingham, Montgomery has 200,000 population, and their arena is 7,500, just to give you a little idea what Montgomery's doing. And Alabama, Birmingham is 196,000 in population, and they've got an arena that seats 8,500. That's a number that sounds like low risk to me. Auburn and Alabama, I told you those numbers. Tuscaloosa is 99,000. I thought that number would be higher, but again, you got a lot of concentration with their big time sports. 99,000, 15,000 is their arena size, and you might be taking a little bit of a chance there. But if people in Tuscaloosa, want it, then that 15,000, you're probably going to get 11, 12,000. But like I said, Birmingham looks good to me at 8.5, and so does, did I say Mobile? I might not have put Mobile in there, but
I think you said Mobile.
Yeah, I've got Mobile. Mobile, their numbers look good as well. And like I said, that's the criteria. I believe there's something going on in that state besides Crimson Tide and Auburn sports, and they've got the university. I think the facilities are good enough. Again, you would have to do location scouting, just like film editors and producers do to, make their productions. And it's the same thing here, but I wouldn't suspect that you're dealing with a dungeon in terms of facilities there. And then of course you get some of the NBA money, pumped into it. And now, you're off and running.
Question.
Any comments on Alabama? I think you were trying to say maybe couple of those cities look good for you.
Oh, well, so when I'm looking at this, Birmingham, I know Alabama well, so Birmingham I think really works. You have an airport right in Birmingham. Montgomery also has an airport. I don't know if Mobile has an airport or not. I don't remember. But I think that they can all be great hosts. I think they could all be great supports. I think that it would be a great shot of income into their overall for the state. I think it would make the money into their economy. But I guess my question here, and I'm looking at Birmingham, Montgomery. I didn't mind those cities. I went to college in the area. Monroe, Lafayette, Colorado Springs. Do you think we would have a hard time selling the pros on going to play and live in those cities during the season?
Yeah, that's always going to be a little bit of a caveat or a possible caveat to the whole thing. But you have some people that they whether they had college dealings in it or whatever, and some people are just curious about things to where look, if they're paying me, I'll play anywhere they ask me to. So you're dealing with that. What I'm thinking is that a lot of these cities do have a charm about it that people just don't know about, that could fit into. Again, you have to location scout and whatnot. But some of these cities, like I said, if one doesn't work, I think it's only fair that these sort of college powerhouses, a place like Alabama, it just seems only fair that they would have one team that would or one group of organization investors that would want to sign up. And then it, like as you said before, could be the statewide team, even if you don't have more than one team, becomes the team that they can play home games, those away and home games that we talked about. But yeah, the players are definitely, there's going to be some towns that players don't like. I mean, even if you look at the NBA or the WNBA, there's probably some towns that people don't really like, but this is where I work. And that makes vacations that much more, or even the road games that much more. I guess they look that much more forward to doing landing in those spots. So, but it is a question, it's a legitimate question.
But I also think that the profession would appreciate maybe being able to make more money. Like I'm in a more profitable situation. So what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Outside marketing. Yeah, some of these towns, like I said, it's curious, even before NIL came in these college towns, how much marketing, local opportunities are there for the players, or will it create new marketing for some of these players? It's like a city like Birmingham. We haven't been used to this. Maybe we can get into more management, more marketing, which is some of these schools are already in the business of putting that to use, and they're getting plenty of practice with the NIL landscape that we're now in. So that could perpetuate localized marketing. And then, of course, obviously, the bigger the player gets, if you can get to that Asia Wilson level, then all of a sudden, especially if you have a really good team, all of a sudden, marketing deals come from outside of the region as well, with that local infrastructure, of course, definitely wanting to get in on it if they hadn't already started before the national explosion for certain players or groups of players. So, it is something that you have to, be worried about. But we're talking about the WNBA, a league that's had all kinds of marketing problems, being in some of the big cities, Chicago, New York, LA, and people are still having a hard time funding. I've had people tell me, who is Asia Wilson? When she did the Craig Kilborn show, or whoever the host of that late night slot on CBS is. I think Craig Ferguson had the spot after Kilborn left, but I think it's Stephen Colbert. She went on that show to promote her latest book. And there's people, that were commenting, who is she? Now, again, you have some people that are just in the dark. They only follow certain conferences, certain sports, certain athletes. And then there's just a wide net of people that don't follow women's athletics at all. And, and they look at someone, the minute Megan Rapinoe comes out on social issues, well, that's a person that, depending on the person, that's a troll. And then you miss a penalty kick in the Women's World Cup, and then it really explodes into a firestorm of negativity. So you've got those perceptions out there. And obviously the smaller cities, a lot of people watching this might say, oh, those cities are too small. You don't need 1 million population to be able to draw teams. That's been proven. You look at the college towns. Now, granted, college is another animal. The question is, after we get through the Final Fours on both the men's and women's sides, can you have that thirst for summer basketball? They've obviously tried in the 12 cities that exist to not incredible success. We're getting a little bit more pop with these rookies coming in, but at some point, the United States of America has over 300 million people. We got to start bringing some entertainment to these folks that's brand new and fresh, because the WNBA obviously has overlooked some of these other cities, including a couple of these beyond the Deep South. I've got now Virginia works really well. This is where it says the possible relocation could happen. The Mystics are in Washington. I do believe the Mystics can survive. They've got a good team, even though they have a horrible record. And I think people haven't given up on them just yet. But if they do decide either to just cancel women's basketball summertime hoops in DC, one thing about it, you've got Maryland and Virginia surrounding it. And with Virginia, the ETAs for Richmond and Norfolk being the university, Old Dominion University, the ETAs are about an hour and a half. I think it's an hour and a half from one city to the other. And I think with the distance from, I believe, Norfolk to or Hampton to Charlottesville, University of Virginia, is about 235. I think the distance between Richmond and Norfolk to UVA is about an hour. So you've got an opportunity to funnel in the people from Charlottesville. People in Hampton and Norfolk are right on top of each other. Richmond's not too far away. So those cities look really good. The arenas are about 7,200 to 8.6. The Hampton Arena, which hosts a lot of concerts, they house about 10 or 11, 12,000. For basketball, it runs about, I'm going to say the arena runs about 10,000. So I think if you can get that confidence, that assurance that people will say in that area that I just mentioned, then I think you can put a team in Virginia. The logistics work out for it. You just got to have the product. And I think, as they say, if you build it, they will come. I think Virginia could be really a good option. The numbers really suggest it. It's a question of whether the Mystics want to stay there or whether we're going to have this little rivalry between the Mystics and that new franchise, whether it be the Division II team or WNBA team. And I'll break down what might be the 8 teams that could add to the 12 that exist. They're looking at 4, but based on this model, they could definitely have they've got to have a 20-team league to really even start pushing profit at all, unless the 20 teams, the additional 8 teams start losing money too. And I think if you go to the big cities like they plan on doing, I'm telling you, man, they are running a risk of going into more and more debt, because those cities may just not be, you're having to compete against a lot of, it's a crowded room. Let's put it that way.
Right. That's a great point.
Yeah. And the list goes on. And that's the beauty of this. This is a long list because, number one, in theory, there's a lot of viable options, but also if those towns aren't interested, you've got other towns that will be. It's kind of a process. You go through the no's to get to the yeses. And maybe you end up having 60 no's and you have nothing to work with. But, you'd be hard pressed to convince me, as I said in episode 1, and anybody who's bothered to listen when I've talked about it with people, that all of these cities think there's no way we could have basketball in the summer. And in this case, women's basketball. And of course, there's more to the list. But, for anyone out there that wants to comment on this, I'd be real curious to see what their reaction is to some of the names or the cities that I've listed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I think we'll next steps from here. I know we have some more information that we want to be able to cover, but I think next steps from here would be we're going to have actual live discussion around information that we shared and get some feedback and some other ideas. Maybe there's some cities that we didn't think about or some insight that people are going to be able to add that are up close and personal in some of these areas that we've suggested. To be able to just expand the dialogue, to be able to kind of just still consider like what are the best ways to be able to help grow this league in a healthy way, to be able to keep it profitable and keep it viable for the phenomenal young talent that we have coming out of colleges over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's like North Carolina, which is where, the neck of the woods that I'm in, ACC country, the Hornets, and then, of course, subsequently the Sting, where Dawn Staley played a few years. There hasn't been that love affair in Charlotte with pro sports teams. Granted, they've tried to support the Panthers. We all know how bad they are. I mean, it's a bad smell coming from Charlotte, the team that sold Kobe Bryant's rights, and we all know what happened after that. And people in Charlotte are having nightmares when he would come to that town and torch that city for basically having his rights taken, his rights transferred to the Lakers by the late Jerry West. So they are the first city most people in the United States who even knows where Charlotte is thinks about. But Charlotte is congested. Charlotte is a town that has had a lot of debt. And, the next best alternative, you're looking at Greensboro, Winston-Salem. Population is about 1.7 when you start putting High Point, Winston-Salem, and Greensboro together. If people in Charlotte are interested in seeing these women play, then you're going to have to funnel in from Charlotte. And the distance between Winston and Greensboro and Charlotte is not, too far of a trip for those who are really, really interested. I think you have to go that route with Charlotte, because when you look at Winston-Salem, you're looking at a population in town of 300,000 per town, 1.7 overall. And then you've got the Coliseum, which seats about 9 to 11,000. So that's a perfect setup. Of course, Michael Jordan's hometown of Wilmington, Trask Coliseum is a little small at 5.2. It's a city of 115,000. But when it comes to living, which is a point that you brought up, they've got 2 beaches, in the town. You're an hour and 15 minutes from Myrtle Beach. You're 30 minutes away from Surf City and all that. If you're into, seeing other attractions, they've got a nightlife. Although I am one to believe that some of these cities, it's actually good to go to cities that might be a little on the quiet side, because, the last thing you want to be in the news is everybody getting in trouble. And that's one of the big problems in professional sports. But the players do have to have something to do. They're grown. They have to be able to handle themselves. But again, you do need attractions, but you don't need trouble. But so Wilmington has, some of those things. It's not my number one option. I just threw it out there for the home team. I would say that they would be option number 4, Boone, up in the mountains. They've got 467,000, 8,300 seat arena. It's up near the mountains. My number one choice is Chapel Hill, Durham, because between Chapel Hill, Duke, Carolina, and NC State, you can share the women's arenas, because Carmichael, I think, seats about 6 to 8. The women at, share Cameron Indoor, that's about 67. I think it's gotten to about 7,000 or 8,000 now. I'm maybe a little bit off on it, but we know the atmosphere in Cameron Indoor Stadium. And if you can get a quarter of that, with summertime basketball, that is going to sell well on television. Carolina and Duke are only 10 miles apart. And if it oversubscribes, if people go crazy wanting to see Angel Reese or Caitlin Clark or Arike or any of these superstars come into town, guess what? You can go to the Dean Dome right down the street, not even 10 miles away from Durham. If you're coming in from Durham or anywhere else, 21,000 at the Dean Dome. And you're going to get games that are going to oversubscribe. So you've got 3 arenas, Reynolds Coliseum or K-Yow Arena. That's the smaller one. That seats about 6,000. So like you said, it's like having a state team where these schools nearby can share some home games. And then, as I said, you can use the Dean Dome. And the question is going to be, will we like WNBA basketball as much as we like our college? But I think given the fact that Charlotte has been a crash and burn metropolis, take your shot there. You've got a pretty good shot. And then you've got Boone, you've got Wilmington, you even got ECU, which is Greenville. They hold 8,000. There's a middle ground in North Carolina that would say, we're down with having a WNBA team because everything always goes to Charlotte and nobody ends up caring about it. But some managers might say, we don't want to go to North Carolina because it's an ACC driven market, but I believe it would work. I can see it, right now, people in Cameron Indoor Stadium going crazy. You think about some of these teams coming in there and putting on a show, people are going, because the key to business is repeat business. They will come back. Somebody is going to be in that town looking forward to going to the games. And again, I think it's less of a risk than some of these other cities, even though others in the comments in future episodes, in either your live chat or in the future episodes might think otherwise.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a fascinating topic. It's a fascinating topic. We'll definitely keep taking a deep dive here. Like I said, I think from here we go into we definitely want to have a live chat about this, and then we also want to kind of take a deep dive into like how they can start rolling this out and how quickly they can take advantage of this type of plan, being that we have so much talent getting ready to kind of like explode into the WNBA over the next 4 years. So I appreciate your time today. Anything you got before we get ready to get out of here?
Well, yeah, like I said, there's a ton of viable options we'll go into in episode 3. Like I said, you got a state like Texas that has like 5 viable options. You've got Tennessee, that's another state that we'll hit on that's got some great culture that, you know, outside of just Knoxville, you know, just like with Baton Rouge, that has the potential. Same thing out west. You've got some teams in the middle, like in Arkansas and all that. Again, the logistics and the ETAs, we'll get into the ETAs a little bit more, how much distance or lack of distance there is for fans to funnel in. That's going to be the real key. But at the least, this is a blueprint where you can get the WNBA up to 20 and you've got enough teams to make a second league. Otherwise, if they don't pay off that debt, which is another thing about episode 3, we'll damn kick around. If they don't get off that debt, this is a great way to start a new league where we have no bills to pay, no IOUs, and we can start a new league. But and again, I think this is a thing WNBA needs to look at, because if they don't, they're going to be in trouble and somebody's going to get locked up and you're not going to have enough money, enough bail money to get out. So we'll touch on that in the 3rd episode, and hopefully people are starting to, get engaged on what can we do to expand the league. I look forward to seeing what the response is and getting back together with you to continue this series.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate the time today. Bam. We just started to scratch the surface here, y'all. It's CS. It's your favorite auntie with Uncle Tendencies. Until next time, stay tuned. Talk soon, y'all. Keep hooping. We out.